Every day, medical practices lose talented employees, valuable revenue, and patient trust because teams spend more time assigning blame than solving problems. And here's the difficult truth. Most toxic workplace cultures don't begin with bad people. They begin with good people operating inside of broken systems. Today, we're going to talk about why blame culture develops in healthcare organizations, the hidden costs that most leaders never calculate, how the infamous front office versus back office battle hurts everyone involved, and most importantly, how you can transform your practice into a culture built on accountability, transparency, and continuous improvement.
Welcome to Medical Money Matters, the podcast where you can find experts, answers, and resources so that you can achieve mastery over the financial and business aspects of your practice.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Jill Arena. I began my career in accounting and finance, and I have more than 30 years of experience running medical groups. I own and operate a national healthcare consulting and revenue cycle company, and I am the author of Physician Heal Thy Financial Self. In 2020, I co-founded the Physician Leadership Project, and in 2025, I released Physician's Edge, the first of its kind CME-accredited online business education for physicians. My passion is to increase financial and business literacy for physicians. Episode 187, The Blame Game and Why a Culture of Accountability is the Antidote. What if the biggest threat to your medical practice isn't declining reimbursement, staffing shortages, rising expenses, or even physician burnout? What if it's the culture you've unintentionally created? That may sound dramatic, but after working with hundreds of physician practices across the country, I've seen something over and over again. Practices spend enormous amounts of time worrying about external threats while overlooking the internal dynamics that are quietly draining productivity, increasing turnover, damaging morale, and ultimately affecting patient care. Every day, medical practices lose talented employees, valuable revenue, and patient trust because teams spend more time assigning blame than solving problems. And here's the difficult truth. Most toxic workplace cultures don't begin with bad people. They begin with good people operating inside of broken systems. Today, we're going to talk about why blame culture develops in healthcare organizations, the hidden costs that most leaders never calculate, how the infamous front office versus back office battle hurts everyone involved, and most importantly, how you can transform your practice into a culture built on accountability, transparency, and continuous improvement. As you're listening, I want you to keep one question in mind. When something goes wrong in your practice, is your first question usually, who did this? Or is it, what was it in our system that allowed this to happen? Your answer may tell you more about your culture than any employee survey ever could. Let's start by talking about the real cost of blame. One of the biggest mistakes healthcare leaders make is assuming culture is a soft issue, something that's nice to have but not essential. Something that belongs in the human resources department rather than the executive office. The reality is that culture has a direct impact on financial performance. Think about employee turnover for a moment. Most medical practices today are struggling to recruit and retain quality staff. Front desk employees, medical assistants, billers, coders, nurses, practice managers, the competition for talent is intense. When someone leaves, most leaders immediately focus on the cost of recruiting a replacement. But that's only a fraction of the true cost. There's the lost productivity while the position sits vacant. There's the time spent interviewing candidates. There's onboarding and training. There's the burden placed on remaining staff members who must absorb additional responsibilities. There's the loss of institutional knowledge that walks out the door when an experienced employee leaves. And perhaps most importantly, there's the message it sends to the rest of the team. When employees see colleagues constantly leaving, they begin asking themselves whether they should leave too. I've worked with practices where leadership complained endlessly about staffing shortages. They believed the problem was that nobody wanted to work. Then we took a closer look. One practice had replaced 6 front desk employees in less than 18 months. The physicians were frustrated. The manager was frustrated. The employees were frustrated. Everyone blamed the labor market. But when we examined the situation, we discovered there was no formal training program. New employees received different instructions depending on who happened to be training them that day. Mistakes were corrected publicly. Expectations changed frequently. Performance measures weren't clearly defined. Employees spent more time worrying about getting criticized than learning their jobs. The issue wasn't a staffing problem. The issue was a systems problem. And that's an important distinction. Because if the problem is people, you're stuck constantly replacing them. If the problem is systems, however, you can fix it. Blame culture doesn't just affect retention, it affects well-being. When people operate in an environment where mistakes are punished, they become defensive. They stop taking initiative. They stop asking questions. They stop sharing ideas. They stop admitting when something goes wrong. Instead of focusing on improving processes, they're focused on self-protection. Think about what happens when an employee discovers an error. In a healthy culture, they raise their hand immediately. In a blame culture, they keep their head down and hope nobody notices. The result is predictable. Small problems become larger problems. Minor mistakes become major issues. Issues that could have been corrected quickly become expensive crises. Nowhere is this more visible than an ongoing battle between front office and back office teams. If you spent any time in healthcare, you've probably witnessed this dynamic. The front desk says billing isn't collecting. Billing says scheduling is creating problems. Clinical staff say administration doesn't understand patient care. Administration says providers don't understand operations. Everyone has evidence supporting their position. Everyone believes they're right. And everyone becomes increasingly frustrated. The interesting thing is that when we map out these workflows, we almost always discover something important. The problem isn't actually located in any one department. It's hiding in the handoff between departments. Let me give you an example. A specialty practice was experiencing significant delays with authorizations. Patients were frustrated. Providers were frustrated. Revenue was being delayed. The front office blamed the clinical team. The clinical team blamed scheduling. Scheduling blamed billing. Billing blamed providers. It seemed like everyone had a different explanation. So we mapped the process from beginning to end. What we discovered was remarkably simple. There was no clear ownership, no documented workflow, no defined accountability, no visibility into where requests were getting stuck. The system itself was creating confusion. Once the process was redesigned, the finger-pointing largely disappeared because people could finally see how their work connected to everyone else's. That's one of the most powerful lessons in organizational culture. People rarely fight when the system is clear. They fight when expectations are unclear. They fight when accountability is inconsistent. They fight when information is hidden. And ultimately, patients pay the price. Patients don't care which department made a mistake. They don't care whether scheduling failed, billing failed, or clinical staff failed. They simply experience the result. Long wait times, delayed appointments, confusing bills, poor communication. When those experiences become common, your reputation begins to suffer. Patients notice culture. Referring physicians notice culture. Potential employees notice culture. Culture eventually becomes visible to everyone outside the organization. So if blame culture creates all of this damage, why do intelligent healthcare leaders keep falling into the same trap? The answer is surprisingly simple. Most healthcare organizations were never taught to think in systems. Physicians spend years learning how to diagnose individual patient problems. Healthcare professionals are trained to take responsibility for outcomes. Those are valuable skills. But leading an organization requires a different way of thinking. Organizations aren't individual people, they're systems. And when leaders don't understand systems, they naturally default to looking for individuals to blame. When something goes wrong, the first question becomes, who made the mistake? Not, What system weakness allowed this mistake to happen? Now, this is actually human nature. Blame feels efficient. Systems analysis requires a lot more work. It requires curiosity. It requires humility. And sometimes it requires leaders to acknowledge that the problem may be rooted in decisions they made themselves. That is not always comfortable, but it is necessary. I've seen physician owners repeatedly criticize staff for billing errors, only to discover that no formal billing education existed. No audits, no performance feedback, no reporting, no process for continuous improvement. The staff weren't failing. The system was failing. And the system belonged to leadership. That's another uncomfortable truth about culture. Leaders don't create culture through mission statements. They create culture through their own behavior. Each time a leader responds to a mistake, they're teaching the organization what matters. Every reaction becomes a lesson. Every conversation becomes training. Every decision shapes culture. Which leads us to another critical issue: psychological safety. Psychological safety simply means people feel safe enough to speak honestly, safe enough to ask questions, safe enough to report concerns, safe enough to admit mistakes, and safe enough to challenge assumptions. Unfortunately, many healthcare organizations unintentionally create the opposite environment. People stay silent because speaking up feels risky. And when people stay silent, leaders lose access to the information they need most. The problems don't disappear. They simply become invisible. And invisible problems are the most dangerous problems of all. Even more concerning, many practices operate without meaningful performance data. When data is missing, people fill the gap with opinions. They create narratives. They make assumptions. They draw conclusions based on limited information. And that's exactly when blame begins to thrive. Because without data, every conversation becomes emotional. Every discussion becomes personal. Every disagreement becomes political. But what happens when we replace assumptions with transparency? What happens when everyone can see the same information? What happens when decisions are based on facts instead of opinions? The answer is transformational, and that's exactly what we're going to discuss next. You're listening to Medical Money Matters, a weekly podcast brought to you by Healthy Practices, a healthcare consulting and revenue cycle company dedicated to keeping our clients independent. If you're looking for more ways to strengthen your business skills, check out Physician's Edge, the first of its kind CME-accredited online business education for physicians. It's a mini MBA online course designed to help you master the financial side of your practice. You can find that and more about how we support practices like yours at healtheps.com. That's www.healtheps.com. And don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss a new episode. Let's talk about what a better approach actually looks like. The organizations that consistently outperform their peers don't have perfect people. They just have better systems. When I talk about systems thinking, I'm talking about the ability to see how people, processes, technology, communication, and measurement work together to create outcomes. Every result in your practice is produced by a system. Good results, bad results, expected results, unexpected results. Everything is connected. One of the simplest mindset shifts a leader can make is changing the question they ask when something goes wrong. Instead of asking who failed, ask what part of our system failed. That question immediately changes the conversation. Imagine a patient arrives for an appointment and their insurance information wasn't verified. A blame-based culture immediately looks for the responsible employee. A system-focused culture becomes curious. Was there a workflow issue? Was there a technology issue? Was training inconsistent? Was the responsibility clearly assigned? Was there a backup process when someone was absent? The goal isn't to avoid accountability. The goal is to understand reality. Because once you understand reality, you can improve it. One of the most powerful tools for creating a healthier culture is transparency. Now, transparency can feel uncomfortable for leaders. Sometimes we worry that sharing information will create confusion or anxiety. What I've found is exactly the opposite. When information is hidden, people create stories to fill in the blanks. When information is shared, people gain understanding. Think about how often employees wonder, how is the practice doing financially? Why are certain decisions being made? What are our priorities? How are we performing? When leaders don't answer these questions, employees create their own answers, and those answers are often wrong. Transparency doesn't mean sharing every detail of every decision. It means sharing enough information for people to understand the bigger picture. It means making performance visible. It means helping people understand how their work contributes to organizational success. One of the most effective things a practice can do is create a simple operational dashboard. Nothing fancy, just a handful of meaningful metrics that everyone can understand. Patient satisfaction, days in accounts receivable, no-show rates, call response times, collection rates, employee retention. You get the picture. When people can see the score, they become more invested in the game. More importantly, they stop relying on assumptions. Instead of saying the front desk is struggling, you can look at the data. Instead of saying billing isn't performing, you can look at the data. Instead of arguing about perceptions, you can discuss facts. Data creates objectivity. Objectivity reduces blame. One of my favorite leadership concepts is accountability without blame. Many people assume those two things are connected. They're not. In fact, they're often opposites. Blame focuses on fault. Accountability focuses on ownership. Blame looks backward. Accountability looks forward. Blame asks, who's responsible? Accountability asks, what are we going to do next? Think about the difference. When an issue occurs, a blame-oriented leader starts searching for someone to hold responsible. An accountability-oriented leader starts searching for a solution. That doesn't mean individual performance doesn't matter. Of course it matters. But great leaders understand that accountability works best when it's paired with support, clarity, and improvement. One framework I encourage practices to adopt is a simple 4-question process. What happened? Why did it happen? What in the system contributed to it? What can we do differently moving forward? Notice what's missing. There's no accusation. There's no judgment. There's no assumption. Just curiosity and improvement. Over time, that approach changes culture dramatically. People become more willing to report issues, more willing to share ideas, more willing to participate in solutions. And that's when organizations begin to learn faster. Another important shift involves helping everyone see the entire patient journey. One of the reasons departments fight is because they only see a portion of the process. Front office sees scheduling. Clinical staff see patient care. Billing sees claims and collections. Each department develops its own perspective. The challenge is that patients experience all of it. Patients don't interact with isolated departments. They experience one organization. That's why leaders must continually reinforce a simple message. There is no front office team. There is no back office team. There is no billing team. There is no clinical team. There is only one patient care team. Every person contributes to the patient experience. Every person influences outcomes. Every person affects financial performance. When teams begin seeing themselves as part of something larger, collaboration becomes much easier. Now, if you're listening and thinking, this all sounds great, but where do I start? Let's talk about implementation. Cultural transformation does not happen overnight. And that's actually good news, because it means you don't need a massive initiative to get started. You simply need consistent actions. The first step is understanding your current reality. Many leaders assume they know what employees think. They're often surprised by what they learn. Conduct an anonymous culture survey. Ask employees whether they feel safe speaking up. Ask whether expectations are clear. Ask whether departments collaborate effectively. Ask what barriers prevent them from doing their best work. You don't need dozens of questions. Sometimes the simplest questions generate the most valuable insights. The second step is leadership alignment. Every leader in the organization must commit to modeling the behaviors they want to see. That means eliminating blame language. It means replacing judgment with curiosity. It means responding to problems consistently. One of the simplest changes you can make is changing your language. Instead of saying, "Who messed this up?" try saying, "Help me understand what happened." It's amazing how much that small shift changes the tone of a conversation. The third step is creating visibility. Develop simple dashboards. Share results regularly. Celebrate progress. Discuss your challenges openly. When performance becomes visible, accountability becomes easier. The fourth step is standardizing problem solving. Many organizations handle problems differently depending on who's involved. That's a recipe for inconsistency. Create a simple root cause process and use it every time. Not just when major issues occur, every time. Consistency builds trust. Trust builds engagement. Engagement drives performance. The fifth step is creating opportunities for cross-functional collaboration. If departments only interact when problems occur, relationships deteriorate. Create opportunities for teams to improve processes together. Invite billing staff, clinical staff, and front office staff into the same room. Map workflows together. Solve problems together. Celebrate wins together. The goal isn't simply better processes. The goal is stronger relationships. As you're implementing these changes, it's important to measure progress. Track turnover, track employee engagement, track patient satisfaction, track recurring errors, and track the number of improvement ideas being submitted. Healthy cultures produce measurable results, and those results become visible surprisingly quickly. Within the first 30 days, you should see greater awareness and improved communication. Within 60 to 90 days, you may begin seeing reductions in conflict and stronger collaboration. Within 6 months, many organizations notice improvements in retention, morale, and operational consistency. Within a year, culture often becomes one of the organization's greatest competitive advantages. Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a few practical ideas you can implement immediately. Start every leadership meeting with one question. What did we learn this week? Not what went wrong. What did we learn? Conduct brief weekly team huddles focused on priorities and obstacles. Create a shared improvement board where employees can submit ideas. Encourage staff members to spend time shadowing other departments. When people understand each other's challenges, empathy increases and conflict decreases. And perhaps most importantly, celebrate problem identification. That's right, celebrate it. When someone points out a flaw in a process, they're giving your organization a gift. They're helping you improve. They're helping you learn. They're helping you prevent future problems. The healthiest medical practices aren't the ones that never make mistakes. They're the ones that learn from mistakes faster than everyone else. They understand that perfection isn't the goal. Improvement is the goal. And when leaders stop asking who to blame and start asking how to improve the system, everything changes. Retention improves. Communication improves. Financial performance improves. Patient experience improves. And ultimately, that's how we create better health through better healthcare. Before we close, I'd like to leave you with one final question. The next time something goes wrong in your practice, what will be your first question? Will it be, who caused this? Or will it be, what can we learn from this? The answer may just determine the future culture of your organization. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Medical Money Matters. If today's conversation resonated with you, share this episode with a physician colleague, practice administrator, manager, or healthcare leader who could benefit from it. These are exactly the kinds of conversations that help organizations move from chaos to clarity from reactivity to intentional leadership, and from blame to accountability. And if you're looking to strengthen your business, financial, and leadership skills, be sure to explore our growing library of resources, educational programs, and community opportunities designed specifically for physicians and healthcare leaders. Or reach out. We'd love to learn about your group and the culture you're working to create. Until next time. Before we wrap up, if you're listening to this and thinking, it's not just one thing, there are multiple parts of my practice that could be running better, I want you to know that you're not alone. Most physicians were never taught how to run the business side of medicine, and yet you're expected to lead complex, multi-million-dollar organizations. That's not a personal failing, it's a systems gap. At Healthy Practices, our operational and strategic consulting is designed to help you close that gap. We work alongside physicians and leadership teams to bring clarity to the business, everything from workflow and staffing models to financial performance, growth strategy, and long-term planning. The goal is to help you move from reactive and overwhelmed to structured, intentional, and in control. For some practices, that means solving immediate operational pain points. For others, it's about stepping back and building a clear strategy for sustainable growth, profitability, and leadership development. And often, it's both. Because when your systems, your people, and your financial performance are aligned, everything gets easier. Decisions become clearer, teams function better, and the day-to-day stress starts to come down. So if you're ready to take a more intentional look at how your practice is operating and where it could go next, I'd encourage you to reach out and start the conversation. You can find more information in the show notes or at healtheps.com.